Children of hoarders, when did your parents go beyond the point of no return? And was there a reason they hoard? Story 1. My grandmother was a hoarder, but only with food. She would buy in bulk and never throw anything away, even if it was past the expiration date. When we visited, we would very quietly throw some things away and not tell her. There was a jar of pickles in her fridge that was older than me, M27. She did it because she grew up in extreme poverty and neglect. Her mother would just abandon her and her siblings for days, and they would be reduced to digging through trash to eat. When she grew up, she made sure that there would always be food available. Story 2. I noticed my dad was over the edge when every cardboard box that entered the house was not allowed to leave because I can find a use for it. And we also at one point had 14 miniature schnauzers in a single-story suburban house because we don't have one in that color yet. Story 3. Dated a girl with a hoarder mom. Their full-size basement, over 2,000 square feet, was always wall-to-wall with just a little path to get to the washer and dryer. It didn't creep into the upstairs until the first son move-away girlfriend had 2 older brothers. Then the brother's room was filled with dollar store stuff and old clothes, etc. But the other brother graduated, and his room was filled with junk. Then the marriage started to fall apart, and that's the state I saw it in. Then entry was floor to ceiling with boxes, about a 2-foot wide path that took you to the living room or right to the bedrooms. The couch was clear with about 3-foot path in front of it. Racks of clothes, stacked boxes. Lots and lots of unopened dollar store toys. All her kids were older than 18, and no grandkids. The kitchen was stacked with piles of old newspaper. Only 2 open spots to eat at the kitchen table. Broke up with old girl just before she moved out, so I don't know how it ended. I'm guessing not well. Story 4. I have the opposite problem. My mom is a minimalist. She's also emotionally remote, and growing up, all love was conditional. I think she wanted the appearance of a perfect household and a perfect life. Any grade less than 90 was punished, and bathrooms were cleaned twice a week. So she would go through the house and throw out anything that was out of place. Our house was sterile and cold. The only memories I have left of my childhood are a single photo album that she puts in the basement, and anything that I have managed to squirrel away. She has thrown away everything from my dad's childhood and has 3 pictures from hers. I go into a panic when I can't find anything, because growing up it meant that she had snatched it. I find myself accumulating stuff now, being an adult, because I am comforted by things being around me. I can't be attacked when my back is against a hard surface. She gave me a copy of That Awful Life-Saving Magic of Cleaning Up for Christmas. Thanks, Mom. Story 5. I think it was when my dad left, about 15 years into their marriage. I grew up in a messy house, but not hoarder-level messy. I know my dad cleaned up a lot, too, after my parents got divorced. My mom went off the rails, depressed, lashing out, and no cleaning. It was a while ago, so I was pretty young, but I think this is also when she started buying excessive amounts of stuff and never throwing anything out. I know she doesn't feel like her job has much value, so I think she derives a lot of satisfaction from buying gifts for people. She used to go through her trash at night and wake us up screaming if we had thrown anything out that could be useful again. As bad as it got after my dad left, my siblings and I still used to clean all the time, so it wasn't horrendous. We'd periodically clean out the fridge and clean rooms of the house. After we all moved out, it got really, really bad. Just piles of completely covering every surface. She still buys way too much and gets furious if we try to stop her. I received boxes of all the time as gifts, and I just donated immediately. I don't even want to thank her for fear that she'll start buying even more as gifts. As a result, I've worked hard to be a pretty tidy person and throw stuff out on the regular. I hated growing up that mess, and I would never date a girl who was messy at all. Just don't want to risk raising kids in the same environment where I grew up. Edited to add, I've noticed a lot of children of hoarder parents feel hurt or resentful that their parents chose their stuff over them. I don't feel this way at all. I know she's incapable of cleaning. I don't see her learning how to do that for me, for my siblings, for anything. I've watched her spend hours trying to clean even one area of the couch, sobbing from frustration, and not even be able to do it. Story 6. My mother owned 3 small businesses. During the financial crisis of 2008, the bank recalled the business loan. She refused to deal with the loss and has now idealized that time in her life as the best thing that ever happened to her, even though it was awful for pretty much everyone because she mishandled her finances so badly and put the family in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyway, imagine having the inventory of 3 Walgreens or businesses had nothing to do with drugstores, but they have a similar level of inventory moved into your home. All the hallways, the bedrooms, the living room, family room, dining, kitchen, etc. are now totally unusable. Boxes and loose mountains of product are stacked higher than your head. You can only sleep on half of your bed because the other half is covered in stuff, and to access the bed you have to climb up and over stacks of boxes. You live in constant fear that the family pets are going to dislodge something and be buried alive. You live in fear that you're going to be buried alive. That's what life was like for 5 years. No amount of therapy or medication or throwing things away. We once brought a dumpster to the house and got rid of an entire bedroom full of junk, but she replaced it within a few weeks, or serious talks had any change on her behavior. For unrelated reasons, my parents got divorced this year. A stipulation of the divorce was that she and her stuff had to vacate the home. Instead of hiring moving trucks, she was doing 2 or 3 trips daily with her minivan. My dad had to get a court order forcing her to remove the stuff, and the judge made my dad vacate the premises because my mom insisted that he was the problem. It took a fleet of U-Hauls and 24 hours going hard to remove all her stuff. She's happy with all of her stuff. She chose it over her family over and over again. It was always more important than us, more important than our safety and health. I wish that she loved me more than she loves a box of expired product that hasn't been opened since 2008, but she doesn't, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy dealing with that. Story 7, I lived with my mom and grandmother who were both hoarders. The point of no return began when my grandmother got divorced and moved into a smaller house. That's when there's no room for anything. Excuse became a thing. I think it's just because my grandmother loves shopping. It's her hobby. She will go to places like Kmart and Big Lots and look at their sale shelf for the best deals and get basically whatever is on the shelf. She forgets what she buys too. On multiple occasions, she will buy me the same book twice. And for Christmas, she literally gets me whole garbage bags worth of small dumb stuff that was on sale, women's socks. She even apologizes because there were more presents because she lost them. So, decades of losing things results in massive piles of forgotten. And she is afraid to just have me or some company go through it because her precious items may be in there. I have a diamond necklace somewhere in there. She hasn't seen that necklace in at least 20 years. Story 8, my mother was a hoarder. I don't know when it started. It was well established by the time I was born. She had been forced to give up 2 babies for adoption in her teens, with rumors unconfirmed that it was her older brother who impregnated her. After that, it always seemed that she spent the rest of her life trying to fill up the hole those 2 babies left in her heart. She had 6 more children of her own, plus adopted a 7th me. And then she raised several of her grandchildren after her kids were grown and gone. And then she just started collecting random homeless people and giving them a place to stay. Our house was a typical hoarder's house, filthy and wall to wall with junk piled and stacked. It was a horrible embarrassment, and I wonder sometimes how I'd be different if I'd been raised in a normal home. After we kids were grown, sometimes we would come in collectively and do a massive cleanup of the house, and I can still remember the look of sadness, grief, on my mom's face when she would sit and watch passively as we carried off all her piles of junk, and she would hide as much junk as she could to keep us from getting rid of it all. That's when I realized she had a weird dysfunctional attachment to this stuff that normal people don't feel. Prior to that, I'd always just thought of her as lazy or maybe just horribly ignorant of how to organize things. Story 9, when I authorized her to buy things for my kids, she was taught by her alcoholic family that her value was in the stuff she could do for the family. And living 10 hours from me and the grandkids meant she couldn't do much apart from buying stuff. Last visit, I found a museum to everything my son had ever remotely liked. Brief fan of cars, every car's car, favorite color orange for a while, every orange object a kid uses. We cut my son off from new Lego kits because the pieces just mix in with the rest. Found hundreds of dollars in new Legi kits. Kid likes snow globes one Christmas. Found 15 beautiful snow globes. It made us scared to mention things, which meant she just bought more stuff that missed the mark because head moved past the phase. Edit, remember that we're talking about hoarding here. We cut him off from new sets, not Legos altogether. Legos are awesome, and I know the joy is to creatively use them independent of the sets. But please believe that my son is not being deprived of Legos. I got boxes of meticulously sorted random pieces, part of my mom's pathology. I got my childhood collection. I got sets that people have bought for my 5-year-old son that we haven't opened yet. We live in a small town home with 2 kids and 2 large dogs. Believe me that I'm not robbing my son his childhood when I say we're good on Legos right now. Story 10, during my 20s, Dad developed traits he hadn't exhibited before, including hoarding. He had an undiagnosed tumor in his right temporal lobe. That's an area of the brain responsible for high-level functions, motivation, prioritization. He literally did not know when he was finished reading the newspaper. So he kept years of newspapers stacked in his place. He was terrified of losing something important if anything got thrown away. What finally got him on track to proper treatment was a CT scan. Obviously, hoarding has many different causes. This cause is rare, But in case it helps anyone reading this thread, other symptoms included a deterioration in various organizing skills, and he gradually developed a short temper. The condition went undiagnosed until it impaired his spatial skills and his balance. This type of ailment usually gets diagnosed because of headaches or seizures, which aren't present in every instance. Story 11. My father-in-law is a hoarder. I have to purge things at home to keep my wife from falling into this. For him, he sees value in everything. He won't part with anything. It is like cutting out his soul to clean out trash. He has 30-year-old catalogs from companies that don't exist. We have had to clean out his kitchen, bathrooms, and living areas annually. The big problem is he is a farmer with tons of space, barns, sheds, and a very large house. We are dreading the day he passes, not for the loss, but the mess we will have to address before we liquidate his house. Story 12 dated a girl whose parents were both established hoarders. In fact, they both already had separate homes and never lived together, because each home was already packed with their respective stuff, that's starting out beyond the point of no return. Note, although we dated exclusively for 7 months, she never would invite me to her place, saying it's just a bunch of boxes. I have a feeling she had the hoarding thing going on as well. Story 13, not my parent, but my grandmother. After her husband died, she started buying all kinds of things she didn't need. My parents live 8 hours away from her, and her other daughter is sick, can't drive. So no one knew how bad it was getting. Now, we knew she had those tendencies. We knew that she bought a lot of stuff, and we knew she didn't clean very well, but we had no idea how bad it actually was. She had a stroke in January, and she wanted to be in her own home. So my aunt, the one who can't take care of herself, moved in to try to help get her back on her feet. Predictably, this was a terrible idea. She lasted 6 weeks. During this time, I drove up to visit and was absolutely appalled. They were eating delivery every night because the kitchen was unusable, just piles of that covered all the counter stove. We later found out the stove didn't even work and blocking you from even entering the kitchen. All over the house, there was just trash and oh God, the mice, so many mice. I also saw a snake. I told my aunt at that time that she needed to get my grandmother help. Keep in mind that my aunt really couldn't even take care of herself, and she kept insisting they were fine. When I got back home, I called my mom and told her how bad it was. She was in the process of taking off from work when my aunt and grandmother had a terrible falling out, so my mom and dad went up there to take over. I drove up to help, and we spent an entire weekend cleaning out 2 bedrooms. Yes, it took an entire weekend for 2 bedrooms. She had 35 Christmas stockings that still had the tags on them. I could go on about how horrible it was. If anyone's interested, this was actually really cathartic. Story 14, my father has some hoarding issues. My father used to be a scrap metal dealer and would like to create things out of it in his spare time. The problem is that he didn't have spare time as he was running the business by himself. A few years ago, he had to move from his place of business as his landlord was selling the property, and that's when I stepped in to help out clean up all the scrap, who had a massive skip bin to load all the scrap into. And it was this moment I saw the hoarding in full swing. I was throwing scrap into the bin, and he was grabbing it out saying that it was good metal, and he could use it for something later on. Doesn't help that he also keeps countless receipts, written notes, stamps, old wrapping paper, and a plethora of other useless stored in various rooms throughout his house. It's sad. I've tried to help. He acknowledges the issue, saying that he's just in the head, but does nothing to solve the problem. Doesn't want to be seen as weak for admitting he has issues. It's going to be absolute for me when he dies, as I'm an only child, and I'll have to deal with all of it myself. Story 15, my mom was a hoarder. She did not hoard everything. She specialized in coats, lady suits, and newspapers. She grew up during the Great Depression and World War II, when there was not much stuff to buy. Years later, she discovered thrift stores would sell the clothes she wanted, but could not afford when she was younger. So when I was a kid, she bought 1 or 2 used coats, outfits, etc. each week. Many years later, my mom went into a nursing home, and I cleaned up the attics and crawl spaces in her house. I counted over 400 coats and outfits, plus lots of shoes, sweaters, etc. Most of the thrift store price tags on them. I estimated she spent about $12,000 on this obsession. Money skimmed from the grocery and household budget that Dad earned. These were 1970s dollars and worth about $45,000 a day. Meanwhile, her kids dressed in old, cheap used clothes. Dad drove an old car, and we lead a fairly austere existence. It makes me mad that Mom wasted so much money on this obsession at the expense of her family. Story 16, something I can respond to. My mom was always very messy before I was born, but it wasn't anything crazy. My father cheated on her because she could be very abusive and, well, she's just crazy. Anyway, he left her with 4 kids, paid child support, but not much else. I think she just felt like she lost everything. Lost her home, lost her life, just lost it. She gets knocked up with me from some rebound guy she was dating, and that ends quickly, so it's me, my brother, and 3 sisters. Fast forward a few years, and we have 117 cats. In a 3-bedroom house, my mom sleeps in one room with me, and my sisters cram into another bedroom. My brother sleeps on the floor because obviously the 3rd bedroom became the spare room, which was crammed floor to ceiling with old clothes, toys, etc. Then it just started spiraling from there. Fast forward another few years, there are garbage bags of old tattered clothing everywhere in the house. Garbage bags of actual garbage, stacks of newspapers, and oh god, those TV guides, those TV guides, and of course, lots of cats got cat dead cats. Also, we could always tell how long we had lived somewhere by how many dead Christmas trees there were in the house. We had to cover up the windows with cardboard to make sure the neighbors couldn't see in, friends weren't allowed over. And in case you're wondering, yes, being raised under constant fear of others finding out you're a secret monster does in fact lead to some incredibly debilitating intimacy issues. But it did give me some heart-wrenching to write about in my college application essays. Hello, Stanford. My mother was married to a good man and had 3 kids, but he passed away from cancer. She met my dad and had me in her mid-40s. My dad was not a good man at all, and she left him and moved back to an old coal mining town in the middle of nowhere. The house was very old, but sufficed, she was a terrible hoarder, piles of stuff everywhere. The kitchen table and counters were always piled up, the entryway, the stairs, coffee, and side tables. She held on to everything. As a child, this was my normal. When kids told me they weren't allowed to come over because my house was a pigsty, I didn't understand. We frequented thrift stores and she bought so much junk. We didn't have much money, and looking back, I don't even understand how she could afford all the junk as I got older. If I tried to clean up, she would guilt me and say things like, "Oh, but you used to love insert something here." One time it was trolls, the other pogs, then would insist on keeping it. I could literally never throw anything away because she would keep it. I've struggled with hoarding my adult life. Never to her degree, though. My husband has OCD about cleaning, so you can see how we could be a disastrous match. However, he worked with me, and I'm in a better place now. I'm not sure where I would be without him. Now, when we go visit my mom, it's hard. It's so clear to me the unhealthy impact of hoarding. She did better for a while and allowed us to help her clean up, but went back to hoarding. She gets so worked up and will even cry if you try to throw the smallest things away. When we visit, I check the date on all foods because she has a hard time throwing it away. I attribute her hoarding to the relationship with my father. When we left in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on our backs and drove several states to get away from him. She often talked about how she lost literally everything she owned, and I feel like the hoarding was a coping mechanism. I could look past it for her because she's an adult and, despite everyone trying to help, clearly doesn't want to change. However, she has passed on her ways to my son. We lived with her for 2 years when he was very young, and working him out of it has been a challenge. He's doing better now and sees that hoarding is not good. Story 17, I am a borderline hoarder. I have anxiety and from time to time, depression. My sister and parents would throw out my stuff when I was a kid. That made things worse. When I was a kid, I collected pretty rocks. I still remember what some of them looked like. Right now, I don't accept regifted unwanted stuff so that I don't add to the stuff. One person who tries to pawn stuff off on me is a aforementioned sister who is so judgy about me keeping stuff. I just don't see clutter. I have to make an effort to do ordinary cleaning. My priority is getting to work and doing laundry. Cleaning up, not only inherently difficult for me, is loaded with baggage about my family being on my case about it. However, when the house is clean, I feel great. Story 18, this is late and probably going to be lost, but I've only ever spoken with one person about this, so I think it's time I get it off my chest a bit. Also, throwaway for obvious reasons, and I'm on mobile forgive formatting. Mine has to deal with cats. At the peak, we probably had 50 cats. I don't know exactly when it went really wrong, but I can tell you how it started. Also, sorry if this is poorly written. This is bringing a lot back. I grew up in a single-parent home. I would see my dad every so often. My dad was horrible and abusive to me and even to my mom, even though they were divorced. This contributes a lot, I promise. Growing up, we always had cats. We adopted a few, but things were fine for the majority of my life. My mom worked a lot, and I was young and busy with sports. So our house was always kind of messy, but I remember I could have people sleep over and stuff. When I was probably 12, we adopted our first stray kind of cat, meaning she wasn't fixed. We always got our cats fixed, but for some reason we slacked on getting her fixed. She's an indoor-outdoor cat, so naturally she ends up pregnant. She has a couple kittens. They're cute. We end up keeping them. Things are still okay, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Any of the females that could get pregnant did. We couldn't keep up with things in the house. I couldn't tell you at what point they got really bad, but they did. We worked with our local animal control lady at some point in time, and she helped us rehome many of the cats, but we still didn't get all of them fixed. So things kept escalating. Things went on for 8 years. We always kept the cats fed and as healthy as possible in a house filled with but at the end all of them were really infested with fleas and went downhill faster than we could stop. When cats get really infested, their red blood cell count goes down, and they get sick. Well, our neighborhood wasn't exactly in the dark about our problem. You could smell it from the street, and many of our cats would go outside, as hard as my mom tried to stop them. When it reached the breaking point, some of the cats were going outside and dying. Their kidneys were failing, and they just went to find people's yards to die. I still remember when the health department and animal control came the day it all ended. They showed me a picture of one of my cats that I had since I was little, saying they found her and she had passed. I lost it. I knew things were wrong. My mom knew things were wrong. But it was like, how do we get rid of all of these cats? They're going to get euthanized. My mom talked a lot about just dumping them out in the countryside and hoping people found them rather than predators. We did that like once, but I was so scary for me. I said never again. Anyways, after that day, animal control and the health department came in our house, saw everything, took away all of the cats except for 2, and we got written up for misdemeanor health code violations or something. I can't remember. But it just so happens that our county had a boarding program that we qualified for, so it helped rehabilitate rather than punish. The house got cleaned up. Well, my mom is still in the process of renovating everything years later. Basically didn't get mentally rehabilitated because it wasn't really a mental problem. It was just a terribly slippery slope we somehow fell down in the midst of the bullshit and depression with my dad. I know I will never fall into that pit again, but it's still hard recovering mentally. Anyway, I kind of hope this gets buried. Just kind of felt like getting it out there. If anyone is struggling with this or something like this, please PM me or reach out to someone, because it can and it will get better if you just get help. Story 19, my mom is a chronic hoarder and refuses to throw anything away and is constantly buying new stuff, food, clothes, dishes, blankets, paintings, magazines. You name it, I bet I can dig through a pile at home and find it. She buys food from a discount market and everything else from thrift stores because she can't pass up such a good deal. She grew up on a farm where they didn't have it bad. Her dad made a lot of money, but he was such a hoarder too. When he died, we cleared out 3 sheds of pure junk from the farm. I may have had my point of no return yesterday, December 26th. I was at my parents' house cooking with my mom, and she said, "Can you give me the milk from the fridge?" I open the fridge, and the first thing I see, front and center, is a big block of moldy cheese. I asked where the milk is, and my mom said, "Oh, it's in the back. I lost it." If the first thing I see is moldy cheese, then by my logic, the milk at the back is going to be, I started grabbing open containers and throwing them at the trash, tomato paste with a thick cap of mold, a Tupperware with greenish crab meat, a plastic container with dark green guacamole, anything I thought looked like it was spoiled. My mom freaked out and ran over to the garbage, saying, "This is still good. This is still good." While picking things out of the trash, I just looked at her and dropped the container I had in my hand on the floor and walked over to the couch, where I remained for the next 6 hours waiting for my ride to get there. I just couldn't stand it anymore. Story 20, I wouldn't say that my dad is deliberately a hoarder, but more so he doesn't like spending time organizing. As a result, his desk is piled high with paperwork. He puts his laptop on a pull-out tray, and the garage looks like a hurricane went through it. His parents have a couple of large barns with plenty of space for everything. I think that he's used to having everything he may need available, but simply doesn't have the space to organize it with ease. One look at the garage, and you might think hoarder, but he doesn't collect things for the sake of it. Since the garage is out of sight, he doesn't center his attention on organizing it. Combined with my mom wanting a tidy house, a lot of stuff just gets stored in the garage, and it piles up. That said, I've picked up some similar tendencies along the lines of putting things down anywhere to organize them later. It's a struggle to get motivation to clean and organize. Having a small apartment doesn't help because I have no dedicated storage space. With less working space, you have to try harder to fit everything in like a slide puzzle. Eventually that becomes a drag. I'm not really writing this as an excuse. I call the habit accidental hoarding. It's certainly a problem, and I wrestle with it regularly. I'm not sure how conscious my dad is of it. Story 21, obvious throwaway. Is obvious my mom is a recovering hoarder. I grew up with it, and it's been hard to unlearn the habits and actually keep my space clean. She finally starting dealing with all that she had piled up when my father died. I think that if they had actually divorced one of the 6 times they separated, she would have started cleaning up her stuff then. She told me that it was building a physical bulwark against the emotional issues she had with my father. He was not abusive in the slightest, but he wanted out of the marriage, but could never get things financially stable enough to do so. With him gone, she has been emptying out the house. It's still a long way from done, but the bathtub in the upstairs bathroom is almost empty, and the second bedroom upstairs now mostly has stuff that I left behind when I went to college. As for the point of no return that happened when I was in elementary school, I didn't realize it at the time, and her never got into my space. But that's when she started swiping clothing from the charity clothing sale she organized and ran for my elementary school. She recently asked me if I wanted to keep the crib that I had slept in as an infant. So she still has a ways to go, but things are getting better day by day. Story 22, after I went away to college, was when things really got out of control. I'm the oldest of five, and while my younger siblings didn't like living in a house with clothes on every surface and dirty dishes left everywhere and boxes lining the hallways, not to mention all the stains in the carpet from all our pets, they were more or less used to it, so they never really cleaned like I tried to. My mom has a lot of anxiety issues and a real phobia of throwing away things that might have sentimental value. Also, growing up with parents who grew up in the Great Depression instilled a real sense of utilizing every little scrap of everything. My dad would help me clean on the down low, while my mom wasn't around to start panicking about what we might be getting rid of, but working full-time to support a family of 7 meant that he didn't have a whole lot of spare time for that. And how it's affected me now, I'm very, very organized and minimalist. I clean if I'm feeling stressed, and even if things don't really need cleaning, and I'm not really sentimental about material things at all. While my mom treated every scrap from our lives like it was precious, nothing was. I fought with my mom for so long about how we lived until I finally realized that I was never going to be able to change her. I have control over how I run my own life, which has to be enough. I love her for all the wonderful things she is, not the things she struggles with, but if I ever make a whole lot of money, she's getting a cleaning crew. I've never written all this out before. Thanks for being here, Reddit. Story 23, I doubt anyone will read this, as this post has already reached top page and is flooded with comments already. I want to write about my story not only as an insight for others, but more as a means of venting and trying to get a grasp on the situation. Disclaimer, my grammar sucks, I'm new to Reddit, and this is all on mobile, and autocorrect is a thing. I'm currently 21, and I have an older brother that is 31. My parents had this house built from the ground up on their property just before I was born, and it was a work in progress throughout my life, and continues to be 21 years later. From what I can remember, the house started how every other house started in the late 90s. It is a large house, though, at about 3,200 square feet with a full basement. As the house was being built, I remember contractors come in to do various things like lay tiling in different rooms and do the masonry on the outside, which was never finished because my parents tried getting the cheapest contractor who didn't even finish the job. I also remember the basement being relatively empty and having an in-home martial arts lesson for the whole family as a type of self-defense lesson when we were younger. As I got older, about 10 or so, I remember my brother bringing a girl over, and at this point the house wasn't perfect, but it was livable and at least moderately sanitary. It's very difficult for me to remember what the house used to be like and how it's changed, similar to a haircut and watching your hair grow. You never see the daily changes, but after a year of growth, your hair is a foot longer and you're looking like a bum. That's how my house is, because I know it used to be decent, and now it's the household equivalent of a landfill. So currently I'm going to college relatively close to my parents' house and living in an apartment there. I go home occasionally on weekends, but usually I just go to a friend's house and sleep there because the house is that bad. I'm not going to describe every room and every bad detail and how disgusting and unsanitary and generally vile every room is, because you can just Google all that stuff. They're all very similar. To address the question, however, I wouldn't say there was a last straw or turning point, however. The collection has been going since the house was built, and it will continue to accumulate. My mom gained this trait from her childhood, I'm sure, and it will be this way until her passing. Like I said, my story isn't any different than anyone else, and I doubt anyone will even see this, but I felt compelled to write about it, because generally I keep this as a secret, because it is extremely embarrassing and hardly anyone knows. It feels good to talk about it, even if no one is listening. Story 24, when I moved out, my room was almost immediately filled with old computer parts and any other junk they could fit. It was like my father was just waiting for the space to keep more junk. He's an alcoholic and manic. My mother was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease about 23 years ago and just suffers every day. Her disease has caused so much pain for both of them. She has always tried to clean or begs him to throw stuff out, but doesn't have the energy or physical ability to really do anything about it herself. My SO's dad is a lot like mine, and he hoards as well. While we are both a little messy, we are also both anti-junk. We have a rule to throw out anything we haven't used in over a year, and when we buy new cloths, we take something from our closets to donate, shirt for shirt, pants for pants, etc. Story 25, I'm afraid my mother is going through this right now. She was born in a third world country and moved here when she was young, so I totally understand her mindset about keeping perfectly good things. I've been at college for 5 years, and in that time the house has slowly gotten full of mostly clothes she buys at Goodwill. Though there's still plenty of food and house decor relating things piling up, I often tell her that she should rent one of those large disposal bins that they take away after you fill it up. and she seems to be on board with it. She has never been married, and if she wants to find someone to spend her life with, she's going to need to self-reflect and assess her current situation. It was embarrassing growing up, not being able to invite friends over, but I think she's starting to realize the social and personal effects these habits are having on her. In a way, her habits have made me very conscious about my cleanliness at college. This has made me increasingly motivated to steer her gathering habits in a positive direction. We'll see.